Hi there, and welcome to our August Q&A. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question. We have 4 questions this month, submitted by 3 different members. 3 of those questions are cycle related, and 2 of those questions are cycle syncing related. So it definitely seems like we are on the same wavelength this month. I'm going to start with the cycle related questions, and then I will end with the seafood related question. So our first question is, can you talk leafy greens? Any in particular that are good for certain times of your cycle? Before I answer the cycle syncing related questions, and this question specifically, I do want to say that I bring a very specific viewpoint of and relationship with cycle syncing. So I love, love the curiosity that cycle syncing seems to have unearthed in a lot of people, where people are becoming more curious about the different phases of their cycle and more curious about the ways that they change both in like physiologically and emotionally and energetically, right? I love that it's brought out this curiosity in us about our menstrual cycles and how our menstrual cycles are about more than just periods. I don't love how rigid some of it feels. I don't love how some of it feels dogmatic and feels like it is overcomplicating things in ways that it doesn't need to. I do think that sometimes it adds to the sense that we have to do everything at the right time in just the right way, or we can't have good health, or we can't have perfect health, right? I don't love that. I don't love that it feels like it's also added to this sense that it is complicated and hard to take good care of ourselves, because now I also have to worry about like, well, which phase am I in and where are my levels and is this the right time to do this thing? I don't love that it's added to that. Don't love that. And I don't love that a lot of it's based on parroting, right? A lot of it is just people regurgitating stuff that they heard other people say, but they never fact checked the person that they heard say it. I don't love that. So, love the curiosity that it has bred, or maybe just brought out in so many of us. I love the awareness that it has brought out, and the idea that we're different every day and that our hormones have an impact on so much more than just our fertility. Like, they are influencing so many other aspects of who we are. Love that. Don't love how complicated it has become. Don't love that for some people, not all people, it contributes to this idea that taking care of yourself is complicated and you need to micromanage yourself at all times. Don't love that. So that said, can I talk leafy greens, and are there any in particular that are good for certain times of your cycle? Yes, we can absolutely talk about leafy greens. I'm a huge fan. I love them. I love that they add color and texture and variety and flavor to our meals and to our snacks. I love that there are so many different types that come from so many different cultures and regions. I love that they're all different types that are available throughout the year and some that are available during specific seasons. I love all of that. Nutrient-wise, I love that they are full of a variety of nutrients, including things like folate and vitamin A and vitamin K and fiber, right? Like, oh, non-heme iron, that's a huge one, especially when we're thinking about decreasing the risk of ovulatory infertility, because non-heme iron specifically is associated with a lower risk of ovulatory infertility. So, like, I love that about them. Other than that, they're just tasty. And I think that that whole sensory and pleasure aspect of food is something that we would be wise not to forget when we're thinking about how a food benefits us, right? Like, providing us with pleasure and providing us with different experiences at meal times is a part of how foods nourish and nurture us. So I'm a huge fan of leafy greens. The second part of the question, any in particular that are good for certain times of your cycle? I shared a little bit about my take on cycle syncing. So with that in mind, that this part of the question, my answer really does reflect my not being a huge fan of the way that cycle syncing has, for better or for worse, led people to focus on different phases of their cycle and what would be beneficial during those phases of their cycle. So I would have to say, no, there aren't any in particular that are good for certain times of your cycle. The reason why I say that is because those nutrients that I listed out and all the nutrients I didn't list out that are packaged in green leafy vegetables, our bodies need all the time, right? Like our bodies always benefit from fiber and iron and folate because there's so much going on in our bodies, and all of our organs are going to benefit from those nutrients no matter what our reproductive organs are doing or not doing during those different phases of our cycle. So I want to point to this maybe as an example of how the idea of cycle syncing doesn't always hold up to scrutiny. You will often see an encouragement to eat cruciferous vegetables on these like lists around which foods or nutrients are most important during specific phases of your cycle. You'll see a recommendation to eat cruciferous vegetables in the first half of your cycle because your estrogen is higher. And the idea is that these cruciferous vegetables support our liver in helping them to detoxify estrogens. And that these cruciferous vegetables are also high in fiber, and that fiber is going to support bowel movements, which is also going to help us to pass. It's like, why can't I think of the word? We're going to go with pass, but that's not the word I was looking for. Stool, which is going to carry away those estrogens as well. Well, we continue to produce estrogen during the second half of our cycle, so is it no longer important? Like, are cruciferous vegetables no longer important during that time? Is fiber no longer important during the second half of our cycle? Like, don't I still want to support bowel movements during the second half of my cycle? Because, like, taking a poo doesn't just matter during the first half of my cycle. Like, it just doesn't really add up when you're like, wait, but, like, doesn't my body always need those things? Doesn't my body always benefit from those things? If we look more closely at the fiber idea of like, oh, fiber is really important in the first half of your cycle, well, a lot of people experience constipation in the second half of their cycle because of their elevated progesterone. So wouldn't fiber be really important during the second half as well? When we, at least what I have found, when we zoom so far in to a food that all we see is a nutrient and what that nutrient can do, we miss out on the fact that that food contains a ridiculous number of compounds and that our bodies carry out a ridiculous number of processes every single moment. And we don't need to micromanage each detail. We just need to give our bodies a wide variety of foods, eat enough of those foods, and our body knows how to sort it out. Like, it knows what to do with all of it. So I don't believe that there's any in particular that are good for certain times of your cycle, because I think that your body will always benefit any time of your cycle from just getting a wide variety of foods, different colors, different food groups, and enough. Like, that's how I tend to look at nutrition. So that's my answer to that one. Hope it's helpful. Next question. Do you recommend syncing your cycle to your yoga practice, like certain poses or flows for specific days of your cycle? Only if the syncing that you're doing is based on how you feel and it is a result of you paying close attention to what's happening in your unique body in this specific cycle, right? Because each cycle can also be different in context with what else is going on in your life. So a lot of people do find that they have less energy during their period. So some of those people find that it feels really good to choose restorative practices or yin practices. But there are other people who find that during the early phase of their menstrual cycle, so that first half during their period, they find that they actually don't want to be still, that they find like movement actually helps to relieve cramps or helps them if they're feeling anxious. So those people might choose slow flow. So it really depends on the person and what they're experiencing and what feels best to them. I do have some sequences on the channel that are phase specific, and I created those sequences based on what I often see people experiencing during different phases and what is going on energetically through a traditional Chinese medicine lens. But that doesn't mean that it would be harmful for someone to do those poses and those sequences during a different phase than what I created them for. It's just, I created it through my lens. I didn't create it for each individual, right? Each individual still needs to notice for themselves what's going on with themselves. So, yes, kind of, sort of, and I would recommend syncing it to your cycle based on how you feel and what feels best to you. I wouldn't recommend feeling like, and I'm not suggesting this is what you're saying, but I definitely have come across times where people were afraid of doing the wrong pose at the wrong time and like ruining everything. Like that doesn't acknowledge the fact that our bodies are resilient, that our bodies are wise, and that our bodies benefit from a lot of different types of movement throughout our cycle. So, to the degree to which it allows you to support yourself, to connect with yourself, and honor how you feel uniquely, I'm a huge fan. To the degree that it possibly makes you feel like you have to do everything perfectly, or if you do the wrong thing at the wrong time, you'll get the wrong result. Not a fan of that. Yeah. All right, third and fourth question. My first question isn't directly related to fertility, more so towards the menstrual cycle in general, although I have been wondering about the connection between PMS and fertility. Lately, I have been experiencing stronger mood swings and emotions during my luteal phase. This started before starting to try to conceive, as well as light cramping that starts almost imminently after ovulation, and I'm wondering if you can recommend anything to support during this time, if general recommendations are even possible here. Okay, so the first question, this first question is actually a bit of a multi-parter as well. So let's talk about the connection between PMS and fertility. I am not aware of, in the Western science, anything that says that PMS specifically is associated with an increased risk of infertility, a longer time to conception, or anything like that. So I don't know, through like more of a Western science lens, if there's a way to say that there is a connection between the two. Yeah, so that's my answer for that one. I would be curious to see if maybe someone who practices like Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine might look at it differently and look at ways that PMS may be pointing to an imbalance that would have an effect on fertility and that we might be able to address. Yeah, I'd be curious to see that. I definitely have some ideas, but I'd be curious to see that. Lately, I've been experiencing stronger mood swings and emotions during my luteal phase and light cramping. So, I can't unfortunately provide specific recommendations because I would have to gather a lot more information. What I can do is let you know what sort of questions immediately came to mind and the sort of questions I would be asking if we were working one-on-one to help me understand if these things might be pointing to something that's not just based in lifestyle, or if lifestyle might be able to address these things. So when I hear stronger mood swings and emotions during the luteal phase, I immediately get really curious about progesterone levels. And once I get curious about progesterone levels, then I get very, very curious about what lifestyle is looking like, right? Like I get curious about the amount of sleep you're getting, how rested you're feeling, even if you're getting enough sleep. I get really curious about what exercise looks like throughout your cycle. I get curious about whether or not you are eating enough to support the production of progesterone and just hormones in general, and supporting your body and allowing it to have enough energy to feel its best and to prioritize things like fertility, because survival is the number one thing and then fertility comes after. I would get really curious about the variety of foods you're eating, and if you're meeting your nutrient needs. I'd get curious about supplements. So that's where I would start, right? So I would be asking you questions about those things. And so I'd love to know. You can feel free to message me and let me know if you'd like to. In each of those pillars that I just listed, how do you feel you're doing? Do you feel like you're getting enough rest? Do you feel like the rest that you're getting is truly rejuvenating and restorative? Do you feel like you are under or over exercising? Do you feel like you are meeting your nutrient needs? Are you taking a well-formulated prenatal supplement? Is there any chance that you need to go to your doctor and have, blood work done to see if there's any other reason that you might be experiencing these sorts of things? So those are the things that would come to mind for me. And based on how we answer those questions, then I would be able to provide specific recommendations. The light cramping, immediately I'm like, ooh. I get curious again about the progesterone. The other thing, I forgot about this part. One of the things I would ask is like, well, how long is your luteal phase? Is it 11 to 16 days? Is it less than that? Are you experiencing spotting during that time? Because that may clue us in on what's going on with progesterone levels. I would be asking about your temperatures. If we were tracking your temperatures, are you experiencing a post-ovulation temperature shift that's sustained during the length of your luteal phase? Or is it kind of like doing this? Is it coming down sooner than we would expect? Those are the sorts of things I would start to get curious about, to see if maybe there's something we might be able to do lifestyle wise, or something that I might tell you to discuss with your provider. Let's see, the light cramping. That's where I remembered the second part. But the light cramping immediately gets me really curious about stagnation. That's where that like Chinese medicine part kind of turns on for me. I'm like, oh, do we need to be encouraging this free flow of energy and blood around the pelvic region throughout your cycle, but definitely right around ovulation and during your luteal phase? Those are the sorts of things I would be asking to get an idea of what sort of recommendations I would make for you specifically. So I do hope it at least gets you thinking about some of the things that you might want to talk to your provider about and investigate in your own life. And finally, our last question. And then I saw you mentioning seafood as a great fertility food and was wondering if you would recommend any alternatives, as I am a vegetarian. So yes, I am a huge proponent of seafood for those who can eat seafood and who choose to eat seafood. The reason for that is because we do have the research, the pro-fertility diet, as well as the Mediterranean diet, that show that there is an association between seafood consumption and pregnancy and fertility outcomes. So huge fan of seafood. Plus, I personally really enjoy it. You didn't ask this, but I'll tell you anyway. So my family is from Louisiana, so seafood is huge in like New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And then I grew up in Southern California, so I grew up eating a lot of fresh seafood because of both of those regions. So I just like seafood, and I can tolerate it, but not everybody can tolerate it. Not everybody likes it. Not everyone has access to it. There are people who are vegetarian and vegan, and so they don't eat it for any number of reasons, right? I mean, people are vegetarian and vegan for any number of reasons, so they wouldn't be eating it. So would I say there are alternatives? No, I wouldn't say there are alternatives. What I would say is that it is simply important to make sure that you are eating the foods that are high in the nutrients that we tend to think of when we think of the benefits, the nutrient benefits of seafood. So we tend to think, of course, that it's providing protein because it's an animal-based food. And we also think that it is providing omega-3s. Those tend to be what we're really thinking about. The good thing is that vegans and vegetarians have access to all sorts of lovely protein-rich foods, right? You have beans, you have peas, you have lentils, you have nuts, you have seeds, and because you're a vegetarian, you also have access to things like dairy and eggs. So you have protein-rich foods to choose from. So that's ticked off. The other thing, the omega-3s, that is where it gets a little tricky. There are definitely plant-based omega-3s. There are not plant-based DHA sources. So that's where we kind of like bump into something. But there are definitely ways to still make sure that you're getting enough omega-3s, and there are ways that you might explore with your provider to see if you can get DHA in as well. So you're going to find omega-3s in things like walnuts and flax seeds and chia seeds and soy. So those are wide open to you. When it comes to DHA, actually, you can also get DHA, which is one type of omega-3, in egg yolks. Not a lot of DHA in egg yolks, but there are omega-3 eggs, and those omega-3 eggs do have higher amounts of DHA than what you would find in just a conventional egg. And the reason why they have higher DHA is because the chickens are fed flax or algae or fish oil in order to up the amount of DHA that is found in their yolks, and that then gets passed on to you. So you might want to look into omega-3 eggs. You might want to look at things like sea vegetables, so seaweed, that's also an option. And then of course there are supplements that are going to provide you with omega-3s, more specifically DHA. So there are algae-based supplements, so that's going to provide you with omega-3s and DHA, or more specifically DHA. And then there's also fish oil supplements. Some vegetarians don't eat fish, but they're comfortable taking fish oil supplements, so that might be something to look into. If you're going the supplement route, of course, have the conversation with your provider. Whew, child, I have talked so much. I hope that you found this video helpful, and I will see you later this month. Until then, be well, and bye for now.